What would you like to do if money were no object? How would you really enjoy spending your life?
Welcome to the Datsusara podcast.
If you say that getting the money is the most important thing, you will spend your life completely wasting your time. You'll be doing things you don't like doing in order to go on living, that is, to go on doing things you don't like doing.
Okay, here we go. We are here with yet another black belt, but this time not necessarily of the Rixton disciple lineage. So I'm changing it up for everybody a little bit, but nonetheless a jiu-jitsu focused podcast again. We're here with Rick Ellis, black belt, and also I believe founder and content creator for the Art of Skill website, and also event hoster and all these kind of things revolving around jiu-jitsu and whatnot. And I guess first thing I wanted to ask you was, between the teaching and making content and hosting jiu-jitsu events, is that pretty much your full-time occupation, or?
Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I used to own a software company years ago, but I shut that down. And uh, then I was thinking, well, I didn't want to go back into tech, and I thought there's got to be a pathway in jujitsu. So I just kept exploring it and going. And, we're doing good. We just finished running our latest retreat. It's called Old Grappler Summit. It's for the over 40 jujitsu practitioner. And we did it at this beautiful 240-acre luxury facility in the mountains near San Diego. And it ended up being a huge success for us in terms of proof of concept. This was our first, large scale, all inclusive luxury event. And, as you can imagine, you're staring at the spreadsheet, looking at the costs of this thing, going, oh, having an existential crisis in that moment. But it turned out great, and we're actually doing 2 events next year. I'm already talking to some heavy hitter instructors. I can't reveal yet because they haven't committed, but it's going to be really amazing.
Excellent. I mean, it looked like it went over really well. And just as far as, like, I don't know, appeal to me, it looked great being an older grappler and just looking like it would be a lot of fun and good company. And then when I showed my wife a little bit about it, she's like, oh, what? Yeah, if you want to do another one of these jujitsu retreat things, I would go on that. That would be nice. I would go with you there. So,
Well, there's a lot of retreats that are sort of lower end, younger crowd, and BJJ Globetrotters, those things, and they're great events. I'm not knocking them; they're great events, but it's a different demographic. It's a different vibe, and so what we're looking to do is capture a little bit older audience that, they've got some resources. They don't want to stay in an uncomfortable bunk bed and rough it, right? They want a nice room and all that. And I think based on the response that we've gotten, there's definitely a market for that group. And, it's a group that wants to understand how to train jujitsu for longevity. We're not 20 anymore. We can't just hammer hard, train twice a day and rinse and repeat. You'll break yourself. So I think for us, it's learning to train smarter, learning to, have a holistic approach to this jujitsu thing, which includes our nutrition and our sleep and all the other variables. And so, my goal is to create a community of like-minded people that want to go on these great adventures and get a big, infusion of jujitsu over the course of the weekend, and have a great time and make friends and all that.
I think it's certainly a great idea. Obviously, it appeals to enough people. I think you'll do well with it.
Mm-hmm.
And but before I'm going to get more into all that. But I'm curious, how did you get yourself to make that jump from going from being software engineer, and I think you were a sound engineer as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I come from a video productions background before I started Datsusara, so I get that a little bit. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, how did you get yourself to kind of make that jump and be okay with that? And, is there a lot of planning involved, or did you just kind of dive in and say, what the heck, not worry about it?
Well, I've had a few different careers in life, as we all sort of do. You head down a path, and then you see an opportunity, and then something else emerges. And so, yeah, back in the 90s, to early 2000s, I was an audio engineer in Los Angeles, and I wasn't looking for a new gig because I was doing really well. I had won an Emmy on an Oliver Stone film. I was working on big time projects. I was doing really well, but I started dabbling in software design. The web was just emerging in the mid 90s, and I knew that this was going to be big. I could sense it. And so I began dabbling, making stuff on the web, and eventually I created a software application that kind of took off. And I was working on Family Guy at the time. I was the audio engineer for seasons 2 and 3. Season 3 got canceled, and so I was out of a gig, and I had this software app that I had written. So I released it, thinking it would be a little side hustle while I found a new gig. And within 6 months, there was a McGraw-Hill book about it. Like, it just took off. It took off like a lightning bolt. So, you pivot, you go down this other road. So I spent 20 years in tech doing that. Ultimately, that company failed toward the end. A lot of things changed on the internet. Everything became free and cheap, and there's a lot of things we didn't. I think I made some mistakes during that journey of not correcting in time. So I had to shut this company down. I had a little jujitsu academy in Wyoming that I was running, which I loved. I loved to teach. I loved running this school. I treated it really professionally, even though I didn't do it for the money in a small environment like Wyoming. It was hard to get over 100 students in that environment. But I loved it. And and I had started the YouTube channel, and it was growing very quickly. And when that company came to an end, I thought, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm burnt out. I love jujitsu. It's a little absurd for this older guy to think there's a pathway here. But, I've learned in life that, if you stay within your comfort, you will never risk anything. Complacency, it lives in comfort. So, you might have that job that you don't like. You're doing some things you don't particularly like, but it pays the bills and you're doing well. And well, that's where the complacency shows up. So I've learned that sometimes you have to just take that leap of faith and just go for it. And it's always worked out for me when I do that, even though it can be bumpy in the short term.
Yeah.
And so I did. I moved to California. Ultimately, I moved to San Diego to get into a bigger environment. I started networking and making great connections down here. I had this idea for doing some jujitsu retreats for older grapplers. I started exploring that on a small scale. Initially, we did 3 events on a real small scale that sold out. And I thought, okay, there's something here. And I started making content, making instructional courses. I've got an instructional course at Fanatics, and they tell me it's one of the top sellers over there, which is pretty cool. And so, yeah, I cobbled together a few different income streams, teaching seminars, teaching small groups, doing other stuff. And here I am. But out of all that, out of the midst of all of that, I think the greatest potential is going to be these retreats that we're doing. I really think that there's going to be a good business there, and I'm excited to keep growing it and keep doing it. I'm very entrepreneurial, and so this is just the next thing to focus on.
Yeah. I think that's pretty great that you were brave enough to just go for it, and you're doing such a good job that you clearly care a lot about how you present and the content and the way you do things. And that doesn't surprise me too much, being a sound engineer and having that background. You obviously,
Yeah.
that's you can apply those skills there. So out of curiosity, which Oliver Stone film was it that you had the Emmy on?
It was a documentary called The Final Days of Kennedy and King, about Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, the assassination. Or no, it was called Assassinated: The Final Days of Kennedy and King. And I don't know if you can even get it anymore. I mean, this was many years ago. And it was a small production. I was part of I think there's 10 of us total working on this film, from the producers, the cinematographer, all that. It was a small group. And he was the executive producer on it. And we won an Emmy. So that is really cool.
That is pretty cool. That's odd. I'm gonna have to go look for that. It's one of the few Stoneworks I actually haven't seen. So I have to go look for that. When you were working on Family Guy, did you have any idea how big that was gonna go?
I was a freelance audio engineer and I was working all over LA in studios. I was getting opportunities to work in Europe. I did some stuff in Japan. And so I wasn't looking for a permanent gig, but they offered me this gig and the money was really, really good. And that the hours were pretty mellow. I'd roll into the studio at 10 a.m. and work till 3. And I was the dialogue. Yeah, I was the one who recorded all the character voices. I would edit the shows with Seth MacFarlane. We'd sit and get the timing of the shows right. I would produce his vocals. He would always sing sometimes on these shows. And as a former musician, I would help produce that stuff. And so it was a super fun gig, but the show got canceled. In the early days, we had no idea how big it would be. Fox never really, I don't think they ever got the show, at least in the early days. They were like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
And they kept moving it around to different time slots, and it just didn't quite catch on. But then it got canceled, and Seth MacFarlane released a DVD with the last 3 years of shows or something. He released something and it sold like 1 million copies or something ridiculous. And so then Fox was like, oh, wait a second. Maybe there's an audience for this. So they came back. They called me. What's funny is I had left LA when this software thing that I was doing started taking off.
Yeah.
My ex-wife back in the day, she hated LA and she was like, let's get out of here. Let's move to Oregon. Let's go somewhere else. And so we moved to Oregon. And they called me up. They're like, hey, we're getting the team back together. You want to come back? And I was like, oh, man, because had I lived in California still, I think I would have done it because it was such a mellow gig. I think I could have tried to manage both things that I was doing, but
Yeah.
I had moved and I didn't. And it's still a thing. I mean, I could probably I would have retired on that show. But it was serendipitous because we moved to Bend, Oregon, and that's how I met Roy Dean. I was one of his first students. It was me and Jimmy on that first day of class, and that became an incredible friendship and association with him.
Now, was that when you started training jujitsu, or had you been training before that?
No, I watched UFC 1, and like us all back in the day, we all wanted to be Hoist Gracie.
Sure.
But there's nowhere to learn jujitsu short of New York City or Torrance or somewhere. There was no way. So, and I was so busy with my audio career, and I didn't have a lot of time to train. I could have trained with Jean-Jacques Machado, and I lament not going there early because I could have put in a decade of training with him before leaving California. He was about an hour and a half away. But still, I was so busy with my career in audio. I had a new family that I just didn't. So instead, I found a Japanese jiu-jitsu school around the corner from my house. And so for a few years, I did Japanese jiu-jitsu, which was cool. A lot of the techniques that we do in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, a lot of judo, a lot of throws, a lot of stuff like that. They didn't really spar. That was the one Achilles heel of that art is you don't spar. So you have no idea how effective you are or not really, because if you're not sparring, you're not really training for effectiveness. So I had some experience when I came to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, at least in terms of the techniques.
Mm-hmm.
I understood a lot of that stuff. But without the sparring, I got destroyed that first day of Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, there's something to be said for aliveness. Yeah, definitely a whole different world. And it is interesting though, because I noticed that, I guess because of, and I'm going to talk to Roy soon too, but because of his background, he's drawing from some of the more traditional arts and then coming to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. So that's got to be interesting how I think you guys have integrated a little bit more of that in there. It's interesting the sort of style that comes out of what you guys are doing, and even just in your testing methods, like I've seen your demonstrations and then your tests and things like that, and those were really fascinating.
Yeah, it's the Brazilians are very non-traditional. They've sort of turned their back to all the history, from Japan and some of those rituals and things from Japan. So I think Roy is a judo black belt, Aikido black belt, Japanese jiu-jitsu black belt, and, killer Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. He wanted to at very least acknowledge that this didn't happen in isolation. We are standing on the shoulders going all the way back to the samurai who began figuring this stuff out. And so he always wanted to infuse just a little bit of tradition into it. We would bow in, bow out, and then, the testing, some of that came from his instructor, Roy Harris, who was one of the first to really want to, codify what do you need to know to be a blue belt? What do you need to know to be a purple belt? If it's just you, if it's just based on your effectiveness rolling, well, that doesn't tell me much about the depth of your knowledge, about the totality of your knowledge. It just tells me that you've got that good armbar that you're hitting on everybody.
Right.
So sometimes that just handing the belt, it can sometimes, be given to people with some gaps in their knowledge, and I've seen that where there's just gaps there. So having a standardized curriculum, I think helps, make sure that at least you don't have glaring holes in your game.
Yeah, I do like when I looked at all that. Um, I like the clarity of it from a student side as well, knowing kind of, okay, this is what's going to be expected of me, and I know what I have to do to be considered at this level of knowledge and skill put together and to move on. Like, because it can definitely be frustrating, especially now. I mean, I've trained at a number of different gyms, and it seems like all of them have a slightly different way of deciding when you're going to get belted up. And some of them, it's knowledge. Some of them, it's just effectiveness and skill. Some of them, it's becoming even just time, because a lot of people realize, hey, it's still a business, and we've got this guy who's been around here 4 years, and I'm promoted in the blue belt. Eventually, going to get discouraged. So there's some of that even coming in now to it. And, that could lead to a lot of, I don't know, it could definitely lessen the quality, I think, of practitioners in some ways. But it's nice to see the clarity that you guys have, even though there's part of me that is terrified by that. And I go, wow, if I would have had to go through this full rigorous testing and absolutely know all these things, I don't know if I would have gotten that first belt. But
Oh, you would have. You for sure would have. So here's what happens. What's funny is I was the prototype. My blue belt test was the prototype for these things to come. He had awarded a purple belt. Jimmy, my colleague, he had more experience when we started. So he got his purple belt under that methodology. And then I was the first blue belt. And I had no reference point. I did this, I drilled with a training partner. You're given a list, not of specific techniques. You're given a list of technique categories. You got to show 4 side mount escapes, 4 guard passes, 4 arm locks from mount, 4 arm locks from guard, some leg locks, some takedowns, all that stuff. It's like 50 things, but it's up to you to select the techniques from the fundamentals curriculum. If you're going for your blue belt or at purple belt and beyond, you can select any techniques. This is your chance to, to shine. And you have to drill and you have to do it. But what happens is, okay, I did mine, but then the next guy that was told, hey, get ready for your blue belt test. They're looking at mine and they're thinking, I got to do better than that. And so they try to top it. So there's this motivator, and nobody in that environment wants to be the guy that says, no, I don't feel like doing that. These were always optional. Roy never made them mandatory. He would just award the belt if that's what you wanted, but nobody wanted to take the easy way out. And as an instructor, I've had that conversation many times with a student. I'll say, hey, you're a 4-stripe white belt. You're getting close to blue. Let's set a date 3 months from now for your test. And they will look at you just with sheer terror in their face. And they're like, I don't know if I can do that. And I'm like, it'll be fine, man. Just get a training partner, come to class a little bit early, just start drilling. It'll be fine. And it magically always comes together. And it forces that student, it's sort of like finishing school for that next belt. It kind of forces you to do that extra work to make sure you're ready. You have to get in shape because you're, run through the gauntlet. You got to, face a whole bunch of fresh opponents. So you've got to do all the work. It's like preparing for a competition. You got to be in shape. You have to be sharp technically. And I can tell you, having gone through this, that my game has never felt sharper as it has the day after I've done one of these things, because you've got all this cool, all this fresh technique that you've been drilling a lot. So it's really powerful. And I also think, there's a lot of imposter syndrome out there. Someone gets their blue belt. Sometimes they disappear. They're just terrified to come back wearing that belt because they think, I don't think I'm a blue belt. Nobody feels worthy. But what I noticed in the Roy Dean kind of environment, I wasn't seeing a lot of imposter syndrome because when you go through that process, at the end of it, you feel worthy because you did it. You did the work. So it's a very powerful rite of passage. And I mean, I can't think of any negatives associated with that. It will always produce a better martial artist. And that system is harder to do. The bigger the school, the harder it is to do that because, it takes time for each student to do these. At a kind of small or mid-sized academy, it can work great. With the bigger academies, sometimes it's difficult to do that sort of approach.
I could see that. There definitely seems to be some good wisdom in it. I mean, I think it's good too because I've been to some schools that maybe just have the knowledge test. Oh, show me 4 throws, show me 4, but then they don't have the effect, the applied test, the actual going against opponents. Maybe you have or other schools like ours where it's more just you just have the Iron Man. But that's pretty much like you've got the belt. We're just kind of having a celebration, after a roll or something. But I really. That is interesting the way you guys do it, and it's funny because I've almost found myself. I've been on the mats way too long to still have a blue belt, but I suck at learning sometimes, or I did in the past, and so I'm very close to the purple belt. But I almost want to self-impose a system onto what I'm doing because I don't have wonderful discipline, and I can get a little bit off in the weeds if I'm not going, okay, well, what do I really need to know to get to this next, spot? And so I find myself getting frustrated when I'm close, but I'm not sure, like, what is the next step? What more do you want out of me? And I can sometimes, talk to my instructors about that, but even that's not always very clear. So having something like, I'm tempted just to look at what you guys, require for getting the purple belt and just go, you know what, I'm just going to make myself figure out all that on my own just to help out, have some structure.
Yeah, there's always a question that students have, like, where am I at in my journey? What do I need to know to get to the next belt? It's very mysterious. You ask your instructor and they say, you got to just keep showing up. And you do have to keep showing up, but that's not a very satisfying answer. You'd want them to say, work on this, work on this, work on this.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you don't get that. Whereas if there are some specific requirements, then it's fairly clear, right? You always have a sense of where you're at in that journey. The thing about the purple belt is that it's no longer about individual techniques. And so our requirements for purple belt is that you have to be able to put combinations of techniques together, 3, 4, 5 techniques in a combination. So it might be, if you're in closed guard, it might be armbar, triangle, omoplata, maybe a collar choke or two. Okay, there's 4 or 5 things from there. And then for brown belt, black belt, it's the same concept, only you're expected to go much, much deeper. So for black belt, I did like 150, 160 techniques. And my goal was to have 10 combinations that had 10 techniques per combination. So that was 100 techniques right there, which was a huge amount of work to put together. People see the finished, polished product and they think, oh my God, that's amazing. But it took months of rigorous work to get that done. Yeah. But yeah, so they're great, and I love that methodology.
Seems like that. I imagine that really helps you learn in general. I was just going to ask. I mean, did you find when you started with jiu-jitsu that are you one of the people that sort of took it up fairly, easily, can understand the concepts and work your way through it, or did you struggle a lot? Because I know, like myself, I just thought I was an absolute jiu-jitsu idiot, and only in maybe the last few years, maybe because I'm a lot older now, when I took a break and came back, maybe I'm, can understanding things conceptually a little bit better. I'm also maybe selecting my teachers a bit better, but I had a really, really hard time in the beginning, and I was always looking for like, how can I learn that? How can I get better at learning this? Because it just, despite whatever reasonable IQ I had, it just seemed so difficult to understand. I just could not grasp things the way I thought I should be able to.
It's a complex art. There's a lot of moving parts and it can take a while. And what's funny is I've taught a lot of people, and I've seen people who started a white belt who I thought, man, this person has no talent whatsoever. Every time I show something, they're reversing it. It gets confused in their mind. And you watch them progress. You're like, I don't think this guy was ever going to get it. You're not telling him that. You're thinking because here he's been at it for 2 years and it's still a little rough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But without exception, all of those people at some point it'll start clicking.
Mm.
And sometimes it's almost from one day to the next where it comes together. And my working theory for that is that some people are sort of linear, and you show them something and they start trying to apply that thing, and then you show them something else and they start trying to apply that thing. I
Mhm.
think other people need to sort of understand the map,
Mm. Yeah.
at least to some extent, understand the entire map so that they can then put it together and say, okay, I can do this, I can do that. Okay, I get it. And so sometimes the ones that start out slower initially, all of a sudden they'll flip a switch and like, where did this guy come from? All of a sudden they're really good. And you're like, man, I had doubts about this guy, but he's doing great. So it's just different learning styles, that people have. Now, I was never an athlete growing up, but I did do gymnastics when I was young. I was a musician playing in bands, and I wanted to do backflips holding my guitar and stuff like that. So I studied gymnastics for all. I was always pretty coordinated.
Mhm.
And jujitsu, fundamentally is just a movement art. We're just moving our bodies. And I think because I was coordinated and, as kind of a nerd mind, software developer, creative, I think I could always sort of see it.
Mhm.
I could see the technique in my mind. So I don't feel, I feel like for me, it came relatively easily, and I became obsessed. And then I also became very close friends with Roy Dean right away. And I think that motivated me. And, oh no, I've got to be the best guy in this room. So I was really motivated to keep training and studying. And by the time I was a purple belt, I literally owned 100 instructional DVDs. And, I was really just fully immersed into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that immersion definitely helps. And I think you're right too. Some people, they need to somehow get a bigger contextual picture of what's going on. And then they can start going, oh, I get it. Okay. This is why this technique over here and this technique over here and these things meet. And I think I had a little bit of that when I came back recently because I was learning from Henry Akins and a lot of other SBG coaches. And then I also had a little influence from 10th Planet because I got bored at some point and went over there and studied some stuff, mostly just guard work but a lot of different things. But I still had that. I was in that mode of like, well, I've got these separate areas and techniques, and maybe I even understood conceptually different parts of in different positions on their own. But I was having a really hard time kind of seeing them all together and seeing why, oh, this position from the guard actually relates to this from the mount or what,
Yeah.
doing that full connection. And for me, running into really like Chris Burns helped me a lot with that. I don't know why. I just got through my thick skull and somehow he was teaching similar things that I knew, but he's presenting it in a slightly different way. And I went, oh, duh. Okay. That's how that connects. Oh my gosh. It just kind of really helped out a lot. And then, there's a lot of other things too, but
Yeah,
it's,
those epiphanies, man. Those are the epiphany is close guard is really just mount on another dimension. If you think about it, if you took that structure, you're in closed guard, they're sitting up, and you simply laid the guy down. I mean, you wouldn't be wrapping your legs around them in mount, but it's essentially the same, sort of.
right.
So, you start really, half guard, the framing, the positioning, it's identical to closed guard or to side control.
Mhm.
So whatever you can do from side control, most of that stuff you can do from half guard. So you start, understanding it on a little deeper level. I think that having the right instructor that can maybe open those windows is really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. And that can be a challenge, but at least I guess these days it's nice that people can go online too and find that. I mean, it has as much danger involved as anything else. You can get off into a rabbit hole or maybe go down some path that maybe isn't great, but there's so much good stuff out there. And like the content that you're producing, the other day I was saying my buddy he was talking about, escapes from the triangle. And I was going, oh, there was this great video that Rick did that I saw. And he went through like, just 3 or 4 different stages of escape that were really excellent. It was great because I could send him to that after class. I said, oh, yeah, this is the one I was thinking about. And he checked it out. I was like, oh, this is great. And then, now we've got something to drill and to work on. And so it's been, it's a really nice thing to have too. So there's a wealth of knowledge out there if you can figure out how to, how to look. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Roy Dean likes to say that this is the golden age of jujitsu with all the media out there, and it's like a fire hose. And also, all that content out there, it's great for understanding possibilities. But my theory is that if you don't have a place in your game for that technique, you can watch all the content you want, and it's interesting. You might be learning conceptually some things, but if you don't have a place in your game to put it, it's not really going to help you very much. And so to me, when people ask, how do I be more judicious in the media I'm consuming so that it helps me more? Well, the question is, where are the gaps in your game? Where are the areas that you're struggling? Because those are the obvious places to begin consuming media, right? You're getting your guard pass. Great. Go watch guard retention videos and keep practicing that until you develop your own sort of system for dealing with that. And eventually the gaps get smaller and smaller and smaller, but by purple belt and beyond, the entire journey is just filling the gaps because you know enough at that point. You've got a game, you're effective, you're just looking. And even as a black belt, I went and trained with Lucas Lepre the other day, who's considered the greatest lightweight in competition history, won 9 world championships. The first one at 20. The guy's a phenom. And man, just finding those little nuggets. He showed a couple things that I was like, oh, that is so good. So good. And I've got a place, I've got a little pocket here. I can put that thing.
Yeah.
That's the best, when you can identify the little things that it may not even have been a true gap in the sense that, you didn't have options from there, but it just helped bring something together. And now you really understand it.
Yeah, those are so valuable. Those little gold nuggets that we can find. I love that. Sometimes that's all I really hope for. If I, meet some high level instructor and go through a whole seminar, if I can just find just one thing that I can really use and integrate into what I'm trying to do, that is extremely valuable. And I love that because rather than trying to, sometimes I'd show up to seminars like, oh, I've got to remember everything they're going to teach. And it's just, that can get overwhelming and frustrating too. So I found
if you can find one thing at a seminar, 1 or 2 things, that's good. That's good because it means that you identified things that you can use.
Yeah.
And sure, if you can videotape it or take some notes, great. Okay, that's great. But it's all about those little things that you can use immediately.
Yeah, I think so. I finally figured out a way to kind of translate my video editing skills, I think, to my jujitsu, where that's part of how I sort through all this stuff, that you find online. Like, okay, well, does it fit into the parameters of the story of jujitsu that I'm sort of trying to create here? This is, what I want to do with jujitsu. And for me, that's more of a self-defense kind of, old school Hickson-ish sort of style, but I have a little bit of extra things I throw in there, throw in some rubber guard and some stuff, but it's there's a certain thing that I'm going for, so it allows me to kind of go through and go, well, that's interesting, but is that what I want to do? Not really for me. Okay, and if I don't have a hole in my game as well, there, it's like, okay, well, yeah, like you said, that's the other thing that's great. You go, well, I'm struggling inside control underneath, bigger, heavier opponents, something like that. What do I need to look for here? But then for me, I also put it through that extra filter of, well, would this work in the kind of jiu-jitsu that I want to develop? And so, that helps really narrow things down so you can not get quite so overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's very smart to put things into, organized buckets of, techniques where you can say, okay, these are the ones that I like, that I can use, that I want to work on, and this one fits good with that, but this stuff not so much. And being kind of judicious, because man, we can get so overwhelmed, and everybody has a short attention span because we're all doing this on our phones, and 30 seconds, by 40 seconds you're bored with anything, which is a weird time. It's a strange time out there when I used to be the guy that could read 900-page books with no problem. It's so hard for me to finish a book these days just because of the attention span deficit. But in jujitsu, that's bad because you're constantly looking for the next technique, the next technique, the next technique. Yeah. Well, effectiveness has nothing to do with the techniques that you select. It has everything to do with the mastery of that particular technique. And so flipping that to where you're not looking for more technique, you're looking for mastery of the smaller subset of things that you do. That's a better strategy. And so,
No.
mm,
I think that can be a lot of, well, I know I also suffer from what I call sort of the matrix syndrome too, where I'll get somebody's instructional and I'll go, okay, cool. And I'm sitting down. I'm like, well, I've got a few hours per class. I'm just going to watch all this stuff. And I'm hoping somewhere by some miracle that it's like the matrix. I'm going to watch and go, oh, now I know all of these things. I'm going to come into class and remember any of them. And it's hard sometimes to have the patience to go, okay, I'm going to just watch this one part, a couple of techniques and or a couple of concepts, and then go and work on that for however many weeks, months, really, if you want to be good about it, that you need to kind of master that, and then move to maybe the next thing and kind of really build something. And that can be really hard too, because I always, it's like, oh, come on, what about that other one, what about that other thing I could be doing,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I've said many times that there's a difference between knowledge and skill. They're related. You have to have knowledge before you can have skill, but they're different things. And to be good at jujitsu, you have to have skill. And what is skill? It means you've got timing. It means your body has been programmed to recognize that there's a moment here where something can happen and your body knows how to do it. In combat sports, they always say if you're thinking you're late, which is absolutely true. So if you show up to class with these things you've been consuming and watching, okay, well, you're at the thinking level with those things. And you're hoping that somehow an opportunity is going to open during the role where you're going to be able to apply that one thing you learned. But that's just knowledge. You don't have skill yet to be able to apply that thing. So you're right. It's better to identify one thing that you just start working, because, every technique has layers to it. There's the superficial, just sort of basic shape of the technique. And then as you drill down, there's so much nuance there.
Yeah.
And to be effective, you have to be deeper into that technique to where you've really programmed it and you understand the angles and the leverage and the connection points and all those things. So yeah, it's fascinating how we try to learn this stuff.
It is, yeah, yeah. It's quite the complicated thing, and there's no end to the depth of it. So it's yeah, it is absolutely, yeah. It's a lot of fun that way, and it reminds me a little bit of when I took that long break from jiu-jitsu. I was playing golf, and it was, okay, maybe not as much contact with opponents, but there was an amazing level of detail where it was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, you can get to a basic swing and certain thing, but then there's millimeters of differences and movements and things that you can do that change, and you never really master it. Nobody does. It's a brutal sport. It's so hard. And so it's actually, it was probably good for me. I think I learned even more patience playing golf and coming back to jiu-jitsu, and I went, well, I thought jiu-jitsu was hard, but golf was hard as hell too, and I did work on that. So it was good, kind of, yeah, building that tolerance meter, and yeah, a little bit of attention span as well.
But you're right, the same, okay, you can be taught the golf swing. Now you've got the basic shape of the swing, but, are you creating the leverage you need? Are you rotating your hips? There's the nuance. And that's jujitsu. You learn an arm bar, you can swivel, throw your legs over their face and hit an arm bar, but to do it live against someone resisting, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think I've been really interested lately, and now that I am getting a bit older, even though in my mind I feel like I'm no different than the 24-year-olds I'm rolling with half the time, but the body tells me different. So there's a whole nother level now where I go, okay, let's get into the fascination of how to keep, also how to keep safe, and have this other filter of doing techniques that are, yeah, going to keep me safe, keep me from getting crushed all the time. Which I find can be a challenge in itself too. Like lately, I've tried to go even slower and even less, athleticism and everything I'm doing. But one area where I struggled, I'd be curious to see what you think about is that I do find myself then often ending up, in bottom positions because I'm trying not to force anything to be on top. And then I go, well, great, now I'm getting crushed again. And even if I'm not trying to struggle really hard and I'm working on making good frames, you're sitting under, a young athletic, somebody who's got 60 pounds on you or more, it can still be a little tiring on the body.
I mean, even if they don't have 60 pounds on you, the fact that they're 20 years younger, Their max heart rate is way higher than your max heart rate. Their joints work better than yours. They're more explosive. The mind, muscle connection is sharper and quicker. Like everything's firing better. And yeah, as an older athlete, you're going to end up on your back way more than you would be if you were 20.
Yeah.
And so the answer to that is to get really, really comfortable being on your back, being in disadvantaged positions, embracing that, because you're going to be there more. I'm there more, even as a black belt. I'm on my back more. I get my guard passed. You end up playing defense a lot. But if you can get at kind of the baseline level, extremely comfortable being in a disadvantaged position, which means you have to be there a lot to develop comfort, and be able to defend with the nuance necessary to, keep yourself from getting tapped. That's the next level. Okay, did I survive this position? I wasn't able to get out from side control, but they didn't tap me. And then once you are so confident with your defense that you can just chill there. In fact, there are some defensive positions where it's almost like a happy place for me. And I've almost become a little too comfortable in those because sometimes I don't, I'm like, Rick, you're just being lazy here. Come on, get to the top, play real jujitsu. I'm so comfortable from those places. But the thing is, once you're so comfortable there, it lets you engage your mind and pay attention to the ways in which people are attacking you, and to be waiting for that moment when they have to transition because there's nothing available for them to catch you with. And it's in that moment that you can then reverse the position and all that stuff. So I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. If, for all older athletes, we're always going to be playing defense more than offense. That's just how it is. And so there's the challenge, get really good at defense. And that's my game, man. I'm super confident against just about anybody that I'm not going to get tapped. And then within that, there's those opportunities to reverse, get on top, increment your position, for a finish that way.
Yeah. That's good. That's good to hear. My own little frustration with it is that I feel like I spent one of the things that I think got better about my jiu-jitsu when I came back was that I finally at some point started to learn how to try to get on top and stay on top. And I was like, oh, I could actually be decent at my top games, because earlier I was always a reactive defensive person. And that's why I spent so much time working on my guard in my early years. It even kept me from getting my blue belt for many years because I was just so hyper guard focused to the detriment of everything else. And so I was finally got a little more excited about my jiu-jitsu. I'm like, all right, I'm getting on top, I'm staying on top, I'm being more aggressive. But then I got the advice to say, hey, you still need to back that. You need to go slower. You need to use less athleticism. I'm going, yeah, but come on, I'm not faster than these 24-year-olds, am I really? But it's like, yeah, I was taking a few extra steps and doing things that I probably won't be able to do soon enough. And so now I've had to try and go, okay, it's okay. Let's go back to the way I was before a little bit more, and yet be comfortable in the defense and do what you were talking about. But there are definitely a lot of those times, like you were saying, where I sit there and I go, am I just being lazy here? And especially the way I like to think about whether or not someone could be punching me. And there are times where I'm on the bottom and I go, okay, I know you can't tap me from here, jiu-jitsu rules. But if this is a street fight, you're pummeling my face right now and it's all over. So it's been hard for me to kind of go, all right, how do I not lose that will to take the initiative, but to also, accept when there's times to just defend and wait and be calm and whatnot.
Yeah, there's a balance there. Like I said, you don't want to be lazy, right? You want to be attempting to get to the top. That's, all roads should lead to the top, generally. And then can you maintain a top position? With those younger athletes, we have to be able to slow them down.
Yeah.
We have to be able to tire them out a little bit. And so the way I approach my top game with guys that are younger, bigger, stronger, faster is I am in no hurry to get anywhere particular. I'm not committed to an outcome. My goal is just to deplete their tank a little bit to where I have a reasonable shot at getting the tap, because when they're fresh and they can explode, they can, whatever, it can be much harder. And so I just work on staying attached, hip connections, shoulder line connections, all the various ways that we can attach to people, and just not being in a hurry to get get the tap, because if you get that tunnel vision, I want that arm, and now you've overcommitted and you can get reversed. And that happens all the time. It's happened to me a million times where you get a little impatient to get the tap, you overcommit, and then you've lost everything. And so better strategy is just be perfectly okay wherever you're at. Uh, and a window will open if you're being dominant with someone and you're crushing them, and you're making it a little hard for them to breathe because your positioning is great from side control, let's say. uh, Things are going to open up because they need relief from that. And maybe the arm comes up. That's your moment where I need to slide my knee under it, get to a high side control, start working for my tap. So it becomes a very incremental game more than that kind of explosive dynamic game that you can play when you're much younger.
Absolutely. And as far as of other things that maybe you've done, especially as you've gotten older, and we're trying to keep up, like you said, with the heart rate and the cardio of the younger guys. I noticed you're friends with Miles Lucas, who does a lot of breath work, and you have a one of his courses, I believe it is on your Art of Skill site. And that's a great course. But yeah, when did you start doing a lot of breath work, and how has that helped you out?
Well, so I think it was I think it was Roy Dean that introduced me to Miles. Roy met Miles up at Grappler's Retreat in Mendocino, I believe. And Miles and I became instant friends. We went and trained, and we've been really good friends ever since then. I really didn't have any exposure to the breathwork stuff other than you see Gary Brecka or Huberman or some of these people talk about breath work, of course. So, I knew about it, but I'd never really done it until I started training with Miles. And what I use most from his various breathwork techniques, there's two things that I use absolutely the most every time I roll. Number one is keeping yourself at an oxygen surplus, because if you think about why we gas out in jujitsu, it's always an oxygen deficit, right? It's never a muscular loss. I mean, your muscles can get tired, but it's not the muscles. It's the fact that you've redlined yourself and you can't get enough oxygen to compensate for that. And so the question is, why are you waiting until you're compromised in terms of oxygen to breathe deeper? And so there's some techniques there, some CO2 clearing techniques that he teaches. And for me, that's been kind of a game changer of being able to keep a consistent energy output throughout the course of the entire roll. Everybody starts strong, and then your energy does this. Well, it's a better strategy is to just kind of keep yourself, more like this as needed. So that's been really helpful to me. And then the idea of bringing your heart rate down in between rounds, because it takes a while for your heart rate to get back to normal. And if you've got 60 seconds, 90 seconds in between rounds, that is not a lot of time to drop your heart rate. Now, with training and with better cardio, your body will naturally recover faster. But even so, we can accelerate that. And so there's some breathing techniques that can help you reduce your heart rate in between rounds so that you can go into the next round a little fresher. Because if you're redlined coming off one round, you've barely recovered, and now you're here again, 2, 3 rounds, you're going to be toast. Yeah. So this lets you kind of get yourself down. And then as you start the next roll, don't just go nuts, right? We're still recovering during the start of the next roll because they're going to be coming at you hard. You're doing your breathing, you're staying safe, you're playing some defense. And there's a moment during that roll where all of a sudden you're listening, okay, he's breathing good now. And now's my time. Now's my time to, turn it up a little bit. So it becomes a little different way of doing that. And those are the two. I don't do much of the just sort of hyperventilation breathing. Occasionally in the mornings, if I'm on my deck getting some sun, I might do it. But I'm not as consistent with that stuff as maybe I should be.
Yeah, I haven't. That's the part that I haven't delved too much into as well. I did a little bit when I was watching his video that you guys did, but yeah, mostly I'm doing the work that's on the mats, and it's amazing how much that's helped me just, not only in just sort of, keeping up, but just being comfortable and not feeling stressed out when I'm rowing. And there's something really nice when you know that you're not breathing and struggling as hard as the person you're going against. This very
Yeah.
company, and kind of hear them starting to do that, like you say. Oh, okay, this is interesting. And it's yeah, it's nice, especially even being one of the older guys at the gym. Like, I'm usually less tired than anybody else when we get done with a roll. And I absolutely, I mean, I love that. It helps to keep your head clear and all that. And I even found what really surprised me was that it used to be when I took a break from jujitsu, whether it was, a year, a week, a month, it would, coming back, I'd always go, oh, I got to get my cardio back again. Boy, that's going to be rough. And there's a little bit of that, but I was amazed. I broke my left toe recently, so I was off the mats for a good, 6 weeks at least before I could really start doing much. But I didn't feel like I lost much at all because I was still using that breathing, and I just went, oh, okay, this isn't that bad. It wasn't such a struggle coming back. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And also some of that, as older athletes, I think we understand our limits better than the 20-year-olds, and so there's almost never a roll that I do where I'm breathing heavier than my opponent. And some of that, again, is my max heart rate's lower because I'm older. I have to stay within my limits. It's like a tachometer on a car, right? Your RPMs, where you can't just be redlined. You got to find a nice cruising. This is where I'm comfortable here. Oh, I've got to get past the truck. Okay, I'm going to redline it momentarily, but now I got to get back. And so it tends to be more of this kind of thing as you roll versus you're just pegging the RPMs the whole roll like your younger competitors, training partners. And so, yeah, I think there's some wisdom in as you get older, you understand better and you're able to just, man, we can't conquer jujitsu in one training session. You got to just pace yourself and you're just chipping away at it, keeping yourself within what you can do, and everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the other areas where I think I'm just starting to get a little better about pacing it is just the amount of training, and specifically the way you train to avoid getting repetitive stress injuries and other just injuries in general. I found that was a struggle for a long time for me to realize, like, oh, okay, you can grind this out and work this position for the next week and go really hard at it to try and learn it. But if you screw up, you create a new injury from that. Like, I've had some trouble with my shoulder because I still made this mistake, but I was working turtle bottom position too much because that's one area where I feel kind of weak in my game. And that just did a number on my neck and shoulder. So clearly I still have to learn it a little bit. But yeah, how have you, and I mean, you started relatively later in life, but I imagine you do a lot of things in your training to kind of avoid those injuries and things like that.
Yeah, I wish there was a way to magically give new practitioners the skill to keep themselves safe because these are learned behaviors.
Yeah.
And eventually you don't have to think about it. Safety is your number one priority, and you intuitively are constantly making small adjustments. Oh, my knee's a little compromised. I'm going to move it, and you're not thinking about it. But you have to go through all those moments. You have to learn that stuff. You have to go through all the oh, I almost got hurt moments. So that's one aspect of it is, it takes skill to truly keep yourself safe. There's always some risk despite that, but it takes some skill, for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then just, accepting that you're going to have to stay within your limits. Those repetitive stress injuries, we all have patterns in our games. And a lot of times the ways in which we play jujitsu night in and night out can, lead to some of that repetitive stress. So we also have to get really good at knowing our body well and understanding when something is just sore or when something is heading toward becoming an injury if we don't take care of it. Because you're sore a lot training jujitsu. Something's always going to be hurting. And if you took time off every time something hurt, you'd never be able to train.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to train through this stuff, but there's a calculus you're making every time you train when you have something sore is, okay, what's the risk to reward here? And sometimes we calculate correctly, sometimes we don't. Sometimes, I tore my rotator cuff in my shoulder, and my shoulder had been sore for months. And I was muddling along. I was just trying to train through it. And then one day it got bad. And so I didn't make the correct calculation. I should have taken time off on the front end. So, it's those lessons that you have to learn. There's no perfect answer. It's all a calculated risk,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that we have to get good at.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, getting good at recovery is something I'm trying to master at this point. I'm still pretty bad at it because I still, like I said, I have that younger brain. So there are times, all right, well, you know what? I've got the time. I can go train twice a day for the next few weeks. Why not? And the brain's, willing. I'm ready to go. I got the energy, but yeah, it takes its toll, and I start getting these weird injuries. Like, it's the dumb thing that I remember somebody I was talking to at the gym when I'd first come back, and I've got a groin injury. And I went, that's weird. I've never had a groin injury from jiu-jitsu. Well, I wonder what he did. Lo and behold, a few months later, now I've always got this soreness, and that's not a fun place to be sore all the time. And I'm going, what did I do? Okay, I guess I got to get better at somehow recovering from that, and doing.
I've squeezed a little too hard from guard or something. I had a small groin tear, and I used to clamp onto people with my legs and squeeze like I was trying to, wring orange juice out of the orange. But
Right.
I came to realize, and that actually taught me to be softer in guard and to just be connected and not be so,
Yeah,
but
that makes sense. Yeah. So do you do any other things to recover? I mean, between supplements, other exercises, supplementally, are there other things that you like to do that help you out?
yeah, I try to do a little yoga every day. I don't go to yoga. It's pretty informal. I don't have a structured routine I do. It's more about exploring my own body and what is it that's sore today? What do I need? And so I'll go through that usually every day, sometimes twice a day. Sometimes in the morning I'll stretch, sometimes in the evening before bed. I've been sitting all day, and then I'll go do that. So that's part of it.
You
I
come
try to do a little.
routine,
Was that?
or did you come with kind of your own routine, or you follow?
Yeah, it's sort of, I've done enough yoga in my life to, I know all the poses and all the routines. And some of it's sort of, I incorporate a little bit of sort of animal movements and sit throughs and sort of jujitsu movement. There's a bit of mobility. I sort of blur the lines a little bit between just stretching and mobility. I think it's sort of, all kind of one thing in a sense. Passively stretching doesn't seem to be as effective, I think. I think the science on that is that if you just passively stretch, it's not as powerful as if there's some kind of dynamic component to that stretch. So yeah, I just, I've also done, I like to do foundation training, which is an isometric way of holding posture, and it's really good for your back. I've got some back issues, and I trained with Jesse Salas a couple of years, one of the partners in, foundation training, the official organization there. And that really helped my back. So yeah, it's just, I've been doing this long enough that I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I can just work through in any given session. And then I also try to do some resistance work, and which means kettlebells. I've got some Olympic rings. I do a little bit of ring work, sometimes just to stretch the shoulders, to get those deep stretching in areas that it's hard to get to. I'll use the rings for that.
Yeah.
And the difficulty is, as you get older, you have finite energy. And if you're training jujitsu 3-4 days a week, and then you're adding strength training on top of that, like, where is the recovery? You are so non-recovered every week that it's very difficult. So, and that's my biggest frustration, that you can't do it all. Okay, I'm going to have to back off on my jujitsu training a little bit so I can do more of the strength training in between, which is going to help me be able to do more jujitsu. And so, you're constantly hitting this running kind of balance point between training and recovery. And I don't have it fully worked out. I do find that it changes on a week to week basis. I have weeks where I feel real good and I hammer real hard, and then the next week I can't do a whole lot of jujitsu. I have to really do the restorative, and it's this kind of ebb and flow.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's sometimes that can definitely be tough. I think one things that I like is when I'm on one of those little obsessive waves where I'm really loving the jujitsu and I can't get enough of training. And it's all I'm thinking about, and I try to ride those pretty hard because I know there's gonna come a point where I lose some interest too. So I'm like, all right, let's go through this quick phase, but then yeah, trying to recover during those times, like I will beat myself up so hard at those points because I don't want to stop to go, like you said, yeah, oh, okay, today I'm just gonna go do some resistance training, or today I'm gonna just take it easy and I'm gonna go do some yoga or something. It can be hard for me to shift those gears and go, all right, especially now as I get older, just you're gonna need that much more time to deal with and to recover. And it's not always fun necessarily. So
I also think that as older athletes, every couple months, at least every couple months, it's it's good to just take a week off and not do anything other than maybe a little yoga, a little, some restorative stuff, but you're not pushing weights around, you're not going to jujitsu, you're just eating good, sleeping good, letting yourself recover because as you mentioned, it's those, aches and pains that start lingering. And so sometimes just a little micro reset of a week in between, and we're all competitive. We hate doing that.
right.
But as I get older, I find that sometimes you just have to just not do anything
Yeah.
if you want to keep on the path.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too. That's one I've been trying to manage lately, is doing that, and then also not getting too distracted when I do that, because I recently, I remember I took a little break 'cause I caught a cold and I had an injury all at once, and I just went, okay, I need some time off, and that was great. I was like, well, I'll pick up a video game. I hadn't played one of those in a long time, and I gotta watch that. That's like crack for me on because I'll apply that same obsessive tendency, like I gotta go through everything and be, do it, and then all of a sudden I'm going, oh, do I want to go to class today? I don't,
Right.
yeah, so there can be a danger in that as well, but it was good to de-stress and just to get the mind off it for a while because, I think everybody can get a little too obsessive, and at some point you can't see straight anymore. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I tend to be a little OCD.
Yeah.
Throughout my life, I've been very OCD. As a kid, I think I had a bit of childhood trauma, and for me, I would just go into my mind. That was my escape. I could just go internal, and I became a little OCD. I think that's where it started. But OCD has actually served me well in life because I get obsessed and I'm able to master things relatively quickly. When I decided to become an audio engineer, man, I was valedictorian in school. Like I got so obsessed that,
Mhm.
and I got really good opportunities immediately because I was so obsessed. And so I've brought that to everything I've done. But as an older athlete in jujitsu, being obsessed can get you hurt, So you have to find a way to funnel that obsession in ways that don't destroy your body.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I did. You're right, though. It is a great tool. I mean, I think for myself, yeah, running a business, doing all that, whatever it is that I get into, if I didn't have that, because I don't really, my discipline sucks, but the OCD sort of thing it will keep me going. If I find something I really love,
Okay.
I will dig into it pretty hard, and so it is good to have that. But yeah, like you said, you got to watch it, especially when you're dealing with putting your body on the line. So speaking of that, there's one thing that you guys, I've heard you and both Roy talk about, to help kind of keep yourself safe, is choosing your rolling partners wisely and actually denying rolls with certain people. I have never been able to do that. So
I never did either. I was the guy that rolled with anybody, even till a couple of years ago. I mean, I just turned 61 for reference, or as a point of reference. It's horrible to say that. In your 50s, you can still pretend that you're still kind of youthful,
yeah.
but you hit that 60 and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, I'm an old geezer now. But, and I totally lost track. What were we talking about?
Oh, and yeah, refusing rolling partners.
Oh, right, refusing. Yeah, that's where I was going with that. Yeah. See, the old brain. But in the last couple of years, I've made a decision that if the person is more than 50 pounds heavier, there's just risk, unless I really know the opponent. There's a black belt that I train with who's like 240, 250, but he moves really well and he's very mellow and he lets me where he can crush me. He's just, he's very big and much more powerful than I am. So if he turns it up, when he's preparing for competition, sometimes I know to avoid him a little bit because he can just be really aggressive. But most of the time he turns it way down. So if I know the person, that's fine. But yeah, you only have one body and it's yours. And if you don't advocate for yourself, no one will, and so it's okay to say no. It's okay to, a lot of nights I'm looking at the white belts on one end of the mat and I'm looking at the skilled guys and I'm like, I'm not going near those white belts. I don't want that experience. I'm going to go over there, but other nights I'm like, yeah, I want to go, I want to test myself a little bit. Sometimes the white belts bring aggression with a low level of technique. And so you go into that knowing that it's a different kind of experience and you have to deal with aggression. And so as martial artists, we should be able to deal with aggression with a low level of skill and aggression with a high level of skill. They're different things. And so, it just depends. But, my ego was such that I was always the guy that said, I'll roll with anybody. I don't care. But there comes a point where the risk to reward just isn't there anymore to roll with everybody.
Yeah. How do people take that? Do you get anybody kind of upset when you tell them you don't want to roll with them?
No, usually not, because typically I'll just be like, nah, I'm just gonna sit this one out, or I'll just say, nah, no, I'm gonna, whatever. I don't find that people really care all that much. And sometimes you tell them, no, I'm gonna sit this one out, and they're over there rolling. Now you've grabbed someone else and you're rolling with them, so you're like, oh, he's gonna think this or that, the other. But no one really cares. No one's paying attention to you, honestly. So.
That's a good way to think, actually, in general. I know my coach, Michael Hines, is one of the things he said when you're worried about being up in front of people and teaching. He said, just nobody's really paying attention to you. He's like, they can barely keep focused on you for 5 seconds of what you're teaching. They're thinking about, what they're going to do later for dinner or whatever. He's like, no, and he may only be partially right about that. Sometimes people really are judging and paying attention, but probably better to assume that they're not anyway. You can operate a little easier. Yeah,
For sure.
yeah, that's good though. Yeah, it's a tough thing to deal with the ego when deciding not to roll with people, because there's always part of me too that goes, well, this is what I'm partially training for, is to deal with someone bigger, stronger, blah blah blah. But like you said, at some point, I mean, you can get your time in that at certain times. But
Well, there's also, there's how you train on a day in and day out basis, sort of your standard training. Within that, occasionally you should sharpen the blade. Whether it's go to a competition, whether it's, okay, for the next couple weeks, I'm going to roll with all the toughest guys in the room. Like, as martial artists, we should be able to do that. But if you want longevity in this art and you don't want to destroy yourself, there's some ebb and flow to that calculus. And so so I think you should mostly train with good quality training partners that are gonna let you work some technique. And they're tough roles. It's not that you guys aren't trying, but there's some safety in that. And then occasionally you push yourself a little bit. It could be a belt test coming up, it could be whatever. You take some time to do all the work. You do the cardio, you do the strength training, you get yourself in shape. And so, but you can't do that all the time, especially when you're older.
right, yeah, definitely a place for both. And I found it interesting how I think Roy Ellis was talking to Roy Dean about how, at different belt levels, he thought it was important that you also, you not only do you know how to sure flow roll and technical roll, but you need to know how to handle someone, like say you got some challenger coming in off the street or somebody who's, needs to be put in their place. You also need to know how to go hard when it's necessary. Because sometimes at certain places it feels like, oh, you're just supposed to get softer and softer as you move up the ranks and technical, and you never do any hard rolls anymore, and why are you doing that? But it's like, oh, okay, it's good to hear that yeah, you still need to have that in the bag.
Yeah, you should be able to turn it on at will. Sort of, and this is really the purple belt and beyond journey is that you should be able to play the various styles of jujitsu. You should be able to play a soft, flowy game. If you've got a partner that can play that style as well, then you can flow. Or you can, turn it up and get the tap. And, for me, sometimes I will set artificial time constraints. Like during any given roll, I'll keep glancing at the clock. I'm like, when there's 30 seconds left, I don't care what I'm doing, I have to get the tap somehow, some way. And so you create little micro games to keep that sharpness in your game. Uh, but you should be able to play the range of jujitsu for sure.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So switching gears just a little bit, before we wrap up, I was gonna say, so at the old Grappler Summit, like what exactly do you guys do? I mean, I know there's various instructors and whatnot, but I was curious how you tailor that and how it goes.
Yeah, well, this last one, because it was an all-inclusive, we had a captive audience for 4 days there. And so typically we have things going on most of the day, every day, although there is some free time and everything's optional. People can show up to whatever they want. So typically at like 7 a.m., there might be a yoga session, or for these next couple that we're going to do, we're about to announce, we'll probably have some kind of, whether it's foundation training or some kind of, restorative modality in the mornings. It can be a breath work session with Miles, that sort of thing. Then we eat breakfast. Uh, we get our morning training session in, and typically, well, the way we do it is we do a couple hours, 2.5 hours of training in the mornings. Then we'll have lunch. Then there's some free time if people want, or they can go back to the mats. We were doing all this extra training. We had some great black belts come out, and they're not official instructors, but they led some classes in the afternoon, and we're going to actually curate that even more, because that was really successful to have those, some of those guys. And so I'm thinking of how do we brand that? Is it the OGS Black Belt Inner Circle? These are, really good black belts who maybe are not as well known, but we've curated them and they're really great. So you've got the official instructors and you've got the other instructors. And then, there's activities in this particular compound. There's basketball courts and volleyball courts and pickleball and a swimming pool. We would go swimming, cold plunge in the afternoon.
Nice.
In the evening, there would always be dinner, and then something after dinner, whether it's a Q&A session or something. And we're going to expand on that concept, maybe bring in a nutritionist or bring in a specialist in some aspect of this to come share.
Yeah.
So pretty much from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at night, 8:30 at night, there's stuff to do at these retreats. And hanging out and making friends. Everybody, the biggest thing we heard was that it was the connections, the people that people, the friendships that people made. That happened very, very quickly. You've started to see people sort of coalesce together in these groups, and then by the end of the retreat, I heard back from many of them saying, "Yeah, we've exchanged numbers. We're going to get together outside of here. We're, we're doing this." And that's probably the best thing. Also, you realize in this environment, because we're all over 40 at these events, you sometimes have, it's hard to gauge your true effectiveness, your true level in jujitsu when you're one of the oldest guys at your gym. If most of your training partners are 30 or 25 and you're 52, you're getting smoked a lot in that room. You're not always successful in that room, and you wonder, am I even good? Am I even really a purple belt? Am I, where does my belt hold up? But then you get into a room with guys that are over 40 and you realize, yeah, I'm in the mix with all these guys. My game holds up, actually. Okay, I'm doing okay. I see that, and realizing that you're not in this alone, that there are, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people around the world that are experiencing exactly what you're experiencing, which is you're 54 years old and you struggle on the mat, well, guess what? There's lots of guys like that out there, and you're going to meet them at these events.
Yeah. I think that's great. It's really nice to get everybody together that, we all have such a passion and a love for this, and, and they had the commonality of, being the more aged practitioners and all the things that come with that. So that's a really nice thing. I could see how that's really appealing, and I hope to make it to one of those myself sometime soon. So
Yeah, you'd have a blast. You would have a blast. I've been to a lot of retreats, and I've loved them all. And I'm a little biased, but I think this thing we're building is going to be the premier retreat in jiu-jitsu. And they're just fun. They're super fun.
very nice. I love it. Well, I urge everybody to definitely check that out and check out all the content that you are putting out, because there's a lot of great stuff. You've got, all sorts of good videos on jiu-jitsu and just other life advice even. So yeah, really appreciate what you're doing, and just the style and quality and of the care of everything you're doing. So good work there.
Mm.
And
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's fun for me to do this stuff, and it's nice to hear when people say they enjoy my content. I'll run into someone and they're like, "Oh, I watched your stuff," and that definitely feeds me. It's a funny thing when you're on social all the time, or you're a content creator. On the one hand, I don't want to take myself too seriously. I don't want to let it inflate my ego, and I don't want to be the guy that's, I become narcissistic because I'm on YouTube. So I don't take any of that stuff seriously. I don't take myself seriously at all. I'm just a normal guy who's been doing jujitsu a long time. Maybe I've got some things to share, but I try to keep it in perspective. But when I hear from people that they've really enjoyed a piece of content, some people even tell me that I've changed their life. That's crazy. I'm like, really? Seriously? Yeah, you said this one thing and it changed everything for me. Like, man, that is so cool to hear. So, I'm blessed to be doing this, and I love it. And it's just nice to, get that feedback.
that is fantastic. Well, and I wish you all the best in everything you're doing, and I look forward to hopefully coming and hanging out sometime, and then otherwise just enjoying everything that you're putting out. So thank you so much for everything you do for the community.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and you are very welcome to join us at one of the events, and you'll have a great time.
I look forward to it. All right, well, thank you for your time as well, and yeah, hopefully talk to you again sometime soon. Thanks for being on.
I appreciate it, Chris. It was fun to talk to you.
Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way.